The first thing that disappeared wasn't the money. It was the room. 6 months earlier, Jaemin Park had walked into board meetings like a man entering a space already owned. Conversations paused, chairs shifted, people leaned forward. He didn't need to speak loudly to be heard. Now, as the final investor closed his laptop mid-sentence and stood up, there was no tension left to hold the moment together. "We'll be in touch," the man said. They never were. The door clicked shut behind him. No one else spoke. No one else stayed. Jaemin remained seated at the long glass table, staring at the faint reflection of himself, tie slightly loosened, eyes duller than he remembered. On paper, the numbers told the story clearly. $300 million gone in 6 months. But numbers didn't capture the real damage. He hadn't just lost capital. He had lost trust. And in business, trust didn't bounce back. It evaporated. The office felt different that night. Too quiet, too clean. The hum of ambition that once filled the building had been replaced by something colder. Absence. Entire sections of the workspace were empty now. Desks cleared. Screens gone. Even the framed awards on the walls had been quietly taken down, as if someone was erasing evidence that success had ever existed here. Jaemin walked slowly past it all, hands in his pockets, unsure of what exactly he had come back for. Closure maybe, or denial. As he reached the far end of the floor, he noticed something that didn't belong. A light. One desk remained occupied. Amara Cole sat there, typing with calm precision, as though nothing around her had changed. Jaemin stopped. "You're still here." She didn't look up immediately. Finished what she was doing. Saved it. Then turned. "I could ask you the same thing." There was no sympathy in her tone. No pity either. Just clarity. Most people had avoided him these past weeks. Conversations became shorter. Eye contact became optional. But Amara had always been different. She didn't adjust herself to fit the moment. She met it head-on. "It's over," Jaemin said, his voice quieter than he intended. "You should have left with the others." Amara leaned back slightly, studying him, not as a boss, not even as a former CEO, but as a problem that hadn't been solved yet. "You really think this is the first time something ended?" she asked. Jaemin exhaled, a dry, humorless sound. "This isn't something small, Amara. The company is done." "No," she said calmly. "Your company is done. That's not the same thing." He frowned. "What does that even mean?" "It means you built something that grew too fast on assumptions that weren't tested," she replied. "And when it started breaking, you doubled down instead of adjusting. That landed. Not because it was harsh, but because it was accurate." "You think I don't know that?" Jaemin shot back. "I think you knew," Amara said. "I don't think you listened." Silence stretched between them. It wasn't comfortable, but it wasn't empty either. For the first time in weeks, someone wasn't treating him like a cautionary tale. They were treating him like someone who could still make a decision. Amara reached into her bag and pulled out a slim folder, placing it gently on the desk between them. "I've been working on something," she said. Jaemin glanced at it but didn't touch it. Another investor pitch. No. Then what? A reset. That got his attention. He picked up the folder, flipping it open. Inside were pages, notes, sketches, early-stage projections. Not polished, not exaggerated, just thought through. He scanned the first section, brow tightening slightly. "Solar kits," he muttered. "Water filtration systems. For communities that don't have stable infrastructure," Amara added. Jaemin looked up. "That's not our space." "It wasn't," she corrected. "But maybe that's the point." He flipped another page. The numbers were modest. Conservative, even. Nothing like the aggressive projections he was used to seeing. "This won't scale fast," he said. "I'm not trying to scale fast," Amara replied. "I'm trying to build something that works before we try to make it big." Jaemin closed the folder halfway, tapping it lightly against his palm. "And you think I'm the one to do that?" he asked. Amara held his gaze. "I think you know exactly what went wrong last time," she said. "Most people don't get that kind of clarity. You do." He scoffed softly. "Clarity doesn't rebuild companies." "No," she agreed. "But it stops you from repeating the same mistakes." That was the first thing anyone had said to him that didn't sound like either blame or empty encouragement. It sounded like a challenge. "What's the catch?" Jaemin asked finally. Amara didn't hesitate. 3 months. He blinked. 3 months for what? To test this, she said, nodding toward the folder. We build a prototype, run a small pilot, get real feedback. And if it fails, then it fails, she said simply. And we walk away knowing we tried something different. Jamin studied her more carefully now. You're serious? I don't waste time on things I don't believe in. He let out a slow breath. You're asking me to start over from scratch. I'm asking you to start smarter, she corrected. He looked back down at the folder. For the first time since everything collapsed, there was something in front of him that didn't feel like damage control. It felt possible. All right, he said slowly. Let's say I agree. What do you get out of this? Amara didn't flinch. No salary, she said. Not for the first 3 months. Jamin frowned. That's not sustainable. I didn't say it was easy, she replied. But I'm not doing this for a paycheck. He narrowed his eyes slightly. So what then? 15% equity, she said. That made him pause. 15, he repeated. Earned, she added. Not given. Based on milestones we both agree on. Jamin let out a quiet laugh, this time not bitter, but surprised. You really thought this through. I had time, Amara said. He shook his head slightly, still absorbing it. A few weeks ago, he would have dismissed something like this instantly. Too small, too slow, too uncertain. Now, it was the only thing on the table that didn't feel like an ending. He extended his hand. 3 months, he said. Amara looked at it for a brief moment, measuring, not hesitating. Then she shook it. 3 months, she agreed. That night, they didn't celebrate. There was nothing to celebrate yet. Instead, they sat at opposite ends of the same desk, going through the details, what they needed, what they didn't, what they could afford to risk. Outside, the city moved on like nothing had happened. Inside, something quieter, but far more deliberate, had just begun. Not a comeback. Not yet. Just a second attempt. And this time, neither of them was interested in rushing it. The first month didn't feel like progress. It felt like resistance. Not the dramatic kind, the quiet, stubborn kind that shows up in delayed shipments, unreturned calls, and prototypes that almost work, but don't. Jamin had underestimated that part. Failure at scale had been loud, public, immediate. This version of it was slower and somehow more exhausting. Their office was no longer a polished glass building. It was a shared workspace on the edge of the city, half the size of Jamin's former boardroom. The chairs didn't match. The internet cut out at least twice a day, and the air conditioning worked when it felt like it. Amara didn't complain. She had already mapped out their priorities on a whiteboard. Prototype, solar unit. Prototype, water filtration. Supplier verification. Pilot location. Simple. Clear. Relentless. The first solar unit failed in under 3 hours. Jamin stared at the flickering panel as it dimmed into nothing. That's a battery issue, he said quickly. It's a system issue, Amara replied, already writing notes. He frowned. The design is fine. It's just the storage. If one part fails, the system fails, she cut in. That's what the user experiences. Jamin exhaled slowly, holding back irritation. You're not wrong, he admitted. But we don't need to rebuild everything. Amara turned to him, calm but firm. We're not building something that almost works, Jamin. There it was again, that refusal to compromise on fundamentals. It slowed them down, but it also forced them to get it right. By the 3rd week, their expenses were tighter than expected. The small savings Jamin had set aside were draining faster than planned. Materials, testing, transport, unexpected fixes. Rate of burn is too high, he muttered one evening, staring at his laptop. Amara leaned over his shoulder. Then we reduced variables. We already did that. Not enough, she said. We don't need 2 prototypes running in parallel yet. Focus on one. Make it work properly. Jamin hesitated. That delays everything else. No, Amara replied. It prevents us from scaling failure. He looked at her, then back at the numbers. She wasn't thinking like someone trying to impress investors. She was thinking like someone trying to survive long enough to matter. Fine, he said. Solar first. The decision helped. Not immediately, but steadily. With fewer moving parts, they began to see where the real issues were. Inconsistent energy storage, overheating under prolonged use, weak casing materials. Each fix took time. Each improvement cost something. But slowly, the system stopped failing completely. It started holding. Finding a pilot location was harder. Most organizations they contacted didn't respond. The few that did were polite, but cautious. "We're not in a position to take risks on unproven systems," one email read. Another simply said, "Given Mr. Park's recent track record, we'll have to pass." Jamin read that one twice, then closed his laptop. Amara didn't comment. She just picked up her phone and made another call. Their breakthrough came from a smaller, lesser-known nonprofit operating in a rural community. They didn't have the resources to demand perfection, but they had something more important: urgency. "We can try it," the coordinator said over a crackling line. "But we can't promise anything." "That's fair," Amara replied. "We're not asking for promises, just feedback." The trip out to the community was nothing like the environments Jamin was used to. No polished presentations, no structured meetings, just people. People who needed something that worked, not something impressive. As they set up the first unit, Jamin felt a different kind of pressure. Not from investors, from expectation. A woman stood nearby, watching quietly with her 2 children. The older one pointed at the panel, whispering something Jamin didn't understand. Amara noticed. "They're asking if it'll stay on," she said softly. Jamin swallowed. "We'll see," he replied. The first day it worked. The second day, it struggled but held. By the third day, the system stabilized. Not perfect, but functional. Consistent enough to matter. The feedback wasn't technical. It was human. "It helps," one man said simply. Another added, "We just need it to last." No one asked about scalability. No one cared about valuation. They cared about reliability. And that shifted everything. Back in the city, Amara compiled the results. Not polished slides, just clear documentation. Hours of consistent output. Failure points and fixes. User feedback. When Jamin looked at it, something clicked. "This is better than projections," he said. "It's proof," Amara replied. Their first investor meeting didn't go well. The room was smaller than what Jamin was used to, but the skepticism felt just as heavy. "I'll be direct," one investor said. "Your last company burned through hundreds of millions. Why should we believe this is different?" Jamin opened his mouth. Amara stepped in. "Because this isn't built on assumptions," she said. "It's built on tested results." She placed the report on the table. "We're not asking you to believe in a vision. We're asking you to look at what already works and decide if it's worth scaling." The investor flipped through the pages, unimpressed. "Small sample size," he said. "Agreed," Amara replied. "That's why we're not asking for large capital." That caught his attention. They didn't get the investment, but they didn't leave empty-handed either. "Come back when you have 3 more pilot results," the investor said. "Then we'll talk." Outside, Jamin exhaled sharply. That was a waste of time. "No," Amara said. "That was a roadmap." He looked at her, confused. "They told us exactly what they need to see," she continued. "Now we go get it." The second month hit harder. Physically, mentally, financially. Amara started showing signs of exhaustion. Longer pauses, slower reactions, moments of silence where there used to be clarity. One night, Jamin found her still at the desk, staring at the same page she hadn't turned in 10 minutes. "You need rest," he said. "I need results," she replied. "You won't get them like this." She didn't respond immediately. Then, quietly, "I can't afford to fail this." Jamin frowned. "Neither can I." "That's not the same," she said. He waited. She looked up at him, not as a partner, but as someone carrying something heavier. "Where I come from," she said slowly. "Opportunities like this don't come twice." The room fell silent. "I'm not just building a company," she added. "I'm proving something." Jamin didn't interrupt. For the first time, he understood that this wasn't just about recovery for her. It was about validation. The third pilot was harder to secure. The fourth almost didn't happen. But they pushed through. And this time, the results were stronger, more stable, more convincing. When they returned to the same investor group, the tone had changed. Not dramatically, but enough. "This is consistent," one of them admitted. Amara nodded. "That's the goal." A pause. Then, We're willing to consider a small seed round, the lead investor said. Nothing aggressive. Enough to expand testing and refine the product. Jamin leaned back slightly. Not a victory, but not a rejection either. After the meeting, they stood outside in silence. Then Amara let out a breath she'd been holding for weeks. That's it, she said. Jamin nodded. That's it. No celebration. Just relief. They weren't back. Not even close. But for the first time since everything fell apart, they were no longer trying to prove they could succeed. They were proving that what they were building actually worked. The seed funding didn't change everything, but it changed enough. For the first time since they started, Jamin and Amara weren't calculating every decision based on survival alone. They had room, limited, but real, to breathe, to test, and to improve without the constant pressure of running out. They didn't waste it. Expansion came carefully. No sudden scaling. No dramatic announcements. Just more pilot locations, each selected with intention, places where the need was clear and the feedback would be honest. With every new deployment, the system improved. Battery life extended. Casing reinforced against heat and impact. Filtration units made easier to maintain locally. What started as a fragile prototype slowly became a reliable product. And reliability, they learned, was more valuable than hype. 6 months in, the numbers began to tell a different story. Not explosive growth, but steady traction. Small but consistent revenue streams. Repeat partnerships with NGOs. Interest from regional distributors. They finally gave the company a name that matched what it was becoming. Revive Solutions. Not a statement, a direction. Amara's role evolved naturally. There was no formal announcement at first, but everyone who worked with them understood. She was running operations. From negotiating supply chains to managing field logistics, she handled the parts of the business that determined whether things worked or didn't. Eventually, it became official. Chief Operating Officer. Her equity was adjusted accordingly, not as a favor, but as recognition. Jamin didn't argue it. If anything, he pushed for it. But with growth came attention. And attention came with assumptions. At first, it was subtle. Questions framed carefully during meetings. So how did you two meet? Interesting dynamic you have. Then less subtle. Articles that mentioned Jamin as the visionary and Amara as key support. She read one of them twice before closing it. Jamin noticed. They'll adjust, he said. Once they understand. No, Amara cut in quietly. They understand. They just choose what story to tell. He didn't have a response for that. Because deep down he knew she was right. The tension between them didn't start as something obvious. It built slowly, in pauses, in unspoken moments, in the way conversations lingered longer than necessary. Late nights became routine again, but different this time. Less chaotic, more focused, and sometimes more personal. One evening, after a long day of reviewing reports, they found themselves on the balcony outside their office. The city stretched out in front of them, alive and different. You ever think about how close this came to not happening? Jamin asked. Amara leaned against the railing. All the time. And you still stayed. She glanced at him. I didn't stay for what it was, she said. I stayed for what it could become. There was a quiet weight in her words. Jamin stepped a little closer. And what about now? He asked. What is it now? Amara didn't answer immediately, because she knew the question wasn't just about the company. When he finally said it, it wasn't dramatic. No rehearsed speech, just honesty. I care about you, Jamin said. Not just as a partner in this. The air shifted. Amara looked at him fully now, not surprised but cautious. I figured, she said. That wasn't the response he expected. You figured, he repeated. I'm not blind, she replied. Just careful. He nodded slowly. And this is exactly how things get complicated, she said. Jamin exhaled. We've handled worse. This isn't about difficulty, Amara said. It's about perception. She turned slightly, her voice steady but firm. You know what they'll say, right? He didn't respond. They won't see a COO who built this with you, she continued. They'll see a narrative that fits what they already believe. Jamin's jaw tightened. And you're okay letting that define. No, she interrupted. I'm not okay giving them the chance to. Silence settled between them again. Not cold, just unresolved. They didn't revisit the conversation. Not immediately. Instead, they did what they had always done when things got uncertain. They worked. A year in, Revive Solutions had grown beyond what either of them initially imagined. Still not massive, still not dominant, but respected. Their systems were now operating in multiple regions. Partnerships had expanded, and for the first time, larger firms began paying attention, not out of curiosity, but interest. That's when the offer came. It wasn't the kind of headline deal people fantasize about. It was structured, layered, conditional. A major tech investment firm proposed an acquisition that would inject significant capital, scale operations globally, and integrate Revive Solutions into a larger infrastructure network. On paper, it made sense. Financially, it was more than either of them had ever held at once. But buried in the terms were subtle shifts. Control would dilute. Pricing models could change. Accessibility, the very thing they built around, could be compromised over time. They reviewed it together late into the night. No distractions. Just facts. It accelerates everything, Jamin said. It redirects everything, Amara replied. He looked at her. You don't trust it. I trust what we've built, she said. I don't trust what it becomes under someone else's priorities. He leaned back, considering. They're offering security. They're offering convenience, she corrected. There's a difference. The decision didn't come easily. For once, Jamin didn't rely on instinct. He relied on what they had learned. Data, patterns, consequences. And when he looked at it clearly, the answer wasn't complicated. It was just difficult. They turned it down. The reaction was immediate. Some called it bold. Others called it naive. A few called it a mistake. But for the first time, neither of them felt the need to explain it. That night, they found themselves back on the same balcony. The same city, different weight. You know this would have been easier if we said yes, Jamin said. Amara nodded. Easier isn't always better. He looked at her. And what about us? He asked. This time, she didn't look away. We're not in the same place we were before, she said. No, he agreed. She took a breath. I'm not afraid of what people will say, she continued. I'm afraid of losing what I worked for. You won't, Jamin said. She studied him carefully. Then, after a moment, then we do this right, she said. No rush. No shortcuts. Just like everything else they built. What followed wasn't a dramatic shift. It was gradual, intentional. They didn't let the relationship define the company, and they didn't let the company suppress the relationship. They built both, with the same discipline that got them this far. Over time, Revive Solutions continued to grow. Not explosively, but meaningfully. More communities reached. More systems deployed. More proof that what they started, quietly, in a nearly empty office, was never small. They didn't become overnight billionaires. They became something harder to measure. Respected, trusted, enduring. And if there was one thing both Jamin and Amara understood by the end of it all, it was this. They didn't rebuild what was lost. They built something better. Something they didn't have to pretend about. Something that didn't need the room to stand when they walked in. Because this time, they had earned it.